Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning and welcome back. It's like the first day of school. Trying to figure out the new teacher. Bonjour. Selon le Parti Vert du Canada, bienvenue à Ottawa. I am Elizabeth May, Member of Parliament for Saanich Gulf Islands, leader of the Green Party of Canada. I'm here this morning to set out our priorities for the parliamentary session, particularly related to existing bills that have been tabled. Particulièrement, le projet de loi C2, nous sommes contre ce projet de loi sur la protection des frontières. Ce n'est pas nécessaire d'avoir d'état de surveillance pour réduire notre liberté civile. So Bill C2 now has a gathering, growing coalition of civil society organizations and others that oppose Bill C2 for comme tous les projets, la grande majorité des projets de loi de M. Carney, actuellement, sont des projets de loi omnibus. C2, c'est un bon exemple parce que nous avons dans C2, sur la loi sur les frontières, nous avons les changements pour la protection des réfugiés, pour les droits humains, les droits civils. So, in the guise of a bill that's about stronger borders, we have a lot of measures that will require study. Reductions in civil liberties. We've had a charter statement released by the Minister of Justice in June, I think in response to the fact that so many civil liberties organizations were horrified by the lower threshold to allow our mail to be opened, our information held by internet digital giants to be open for review, for U.S. agencies to be able to gather private information about Canadians. At the same time, significant reductions in refugee rights, what some refugee rights organizations are now calling a new deportation infrastructure. So I'll be doing everything possible to improve, amend, change, or preferably see the Prime Minister withdraw Bill C2. Aussi, je suis contre le projet de loi C4 seulement à cause de partie 4 dans C4. So we have a bill on affordability. Obviously, I'm not keen on removing the consumer carbon tax, but that was a Liberal promise in the election, so no surprise. But it was never mentioned in the election that Part 4, C4, which has nothing to do with affordability, changes to the Elections Act will be thrown in to affordability. The Part 4 of Bill C4 removes any responsibility on the part of political parties to protect the private information of Canadians. So to the extent that we already had such laws in the Elections Act, Part 4 says, quote, these sections are deemed never to have come into force and are repealed. I think it's unusual, I've never seen anything like it, that if and when Bill C4 passes, these sections will, quote, come into force May 31st, 2000. So it's not really, it isn't an amendment, but this is a time machine. Nothing for protection of privacy of Canadians by federal political parties will be required, and any errors or violations of our privacy that occurred between the year 2000 and now didn't occur, because if this law passes as written, it takes effect 25 years ago. After the experience of May and June, I think one of the things I want to be very clear, je veux souligner que ce n'est pas acceptable d'avoir une situation où la vitesse est plus importante que le processus parlementaire pour notre démocratie. So using the excuse that this must be done quickly, we saw the programming motion for Bill C5 allow a bill to be passed over the objections of, for instance, the Canadian Cancer Society, that was concerned that by reducing interprovincial barriers, we would be risking the health of Canadians. Based on the concerns of the Canadian Cancer Society, I was the only member of Parliament to vote against Part 1 of Bill C5. The rest of the progressive opposition parties voted against Bill C5, but they didn't need our votes because they had the Conservatives backing up to say this kind of abuse of parliamentary process where a bill is not properly studied in committee and witnesses with important things to say. The Canadian Cancer Society was able to testify, but all the amendments to Bill C-5 were due before we heard their evidence. So for all of the pieces of legislation that we'll be seeing this fall, I hope we never again see anything like the programming motion used to bulldoze through Bill C-5 without adequate study. We know we will be seeing, because our Prime Minister told Mr. Trump to expect it, we will be seeing a piece of legislation to repeal the digital services tax. It is on the books, it is law. So far, in response to pressure from Mr. Trump, Mr. Carney had told the Minister of Finance not to collect the tax, but that is still on the books. I will have other legislative priorities to speak to later this week involving collaborative work with the Senate, but for now, priorities for this House will be to press the government. What is the climate plan now that key elements of climate action are being removed? And by the way, those elements were not adequate to meet our Paris Agreement targets. We need to know what is the plan instead. Removing the consumer carbon tax, putting a pause on the EV vehicle mandate. Even with those measures, we weren't close to hitting our target, and now we have a government committing to projects that will increase greenhouse gases, not reduce them. C'est important de dire à M. Carney, notre Premier ministre, que ce n'est pas un choix pour lui de choisir l'accord de Paris ou non. C'est une loi internationale. C'est un traité avec l'obligation du Canada comme un parti qui respecte les lois internationales. L'accord de Paris et les lois internationales. We know that Mr. Trump has taken the legal steps to withdraw the United States from the Paris Agreement. Canada is committed under international law to the targets we have tabled for 2030. À Madame Dubreuil, ce n'est pas acceptable de dire que nous avons un engagement à 2050. Ce n'est pas notre obligation. Nous avons faire une obligation, nous avons fait un engagement légal d'atteindre les cibles du Canada pour l'année 2030. So we have an obligation. To Mr. Poilievre, it was never so clear as listening to Pierre Poilievre talk with Catherine Cullen on the House that he needs some basic information. Climate 101, perhaps I can hold a seminar and invite members of Parliament who don't understand what we have agreed to under the Paris Agreement, under the United Nations Declaration, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change that Canada signed and ratified back in 1992. It's very clear that what Mr. Poilievre said on CBC Radio on the House is complete hooey. You're not going to ever get credits for Canada meeting our targets based on this hypothetical and rather magical notion that China will reduce its emissions because of shipments from Canada of LNG. Number one, that's not true. LNG has the same carbon footprint as coal when it comes from fracked gas. But number two, reductions in other countries, even if Canada helped, don't help Canada reach a domestic target we're required to meet by law. So again, it's as now stands, the only party leader re-elected with a strong commitment to climate action. I feel that's an important part of our agenda for this fall, is to encourage the government to recognize that our international obligations aren't mere political choice. They are international obligations. Avec ça, je termine, mais non, pas terminé.
Il y a des groupes de militants verts qui vous demandent de démissionner dès maintenant pour pouvoir enclencher le processus de leadership. Qu'est-ce que vous allez faire?
À qui? Qui groupe environnemental?
Je peux vous sortir le communiqué de presse, là, mais qui est sorti aujourd'hui. There's a group asking for you to resign.
Non, ce n'est pas un groupe environnemental. Non, ce n'est pas un groupe. C'est quelques membres du Parti vert. Nous sommes un parti démocratique. Nous avons dans notre Constitution une obligation dans notre Constitution, et je suis d'accord avec ça. J'ai déjà fait l'annonce que je suis absolument certain qu'avant les prochaines élections et avec le Conseil fédéral, pas moi-même toute seule, Nous faisons les décisions comme un groupe avec le processus de consensus. Nous sommes engagés tout le monde d'avoir un course à la chefferie avant la prochaine élection. Je ne suis pas certain, je pense que dans le premier mois de 2026, mais ce n'est pas à moi de décider, c'est les décisions de la Conseil fédéral. Ce n'est pas un groupe.
Mais donc, vous dites première moitié de 2026? Parce que vous dites avant la prochaine élection, mais on ne sait pas quand sera la prochaine élection, on est en situation minoritaire.
Oui, c'est nécessaire d'avoir un processus avec un plan. Et pour nous maintenant, comme Verts, nous sommes fiers que nous avons seulement, oui, j'espère que c'est plus que moi, c'est un grand, pour moi, tragédie que notre député de Kitchener-Centre, Mike Morris, a perdu son siège à un député conservateur. Quand même, il a décidé de présenter encore, il est nominé pour Kitchener-Centre. On doit avoir le temps pour la nomination des candidats et pour un course à la chefferie avec des résultats qui marchent bien. La dernière fois, quand je me démissionné en 2019, ce n'est pas un grand succès. C'est ce mot que je veux dire pour ça. Les leçons de cette période, c'est que j'ai fait la décision de démissionner immédiatement. Maintenant, c'est différent. Avec les leçons de nos expériences comme Vert, je vais rester ici comme chef jusqu'au moment comme d'habitude.
Qu'est-ce que ça n'a pas été un succès? Qu'est-ce qui a fait c'est quoi le problème de 2019?
I stepped down in 2019 immediately. That required an immediate appointment of an interim leader. It created a process where, and then we were hit with COVID. I'm not going to get into all the debriefing of what happened in the leadership race, but we didn't have a good plan going in, and we didn't have enough process to engage our members in knowing the candidates better before election and for the candidates to know us better. So we're going to make sure we have a solid plan, but it's not my decision how to make that plan. That can't involve me. That is the decision of the Federal Council. We're in the midst of a leadership review, as you know, as well. We have elections that are normal in the course of the changeover. We have half of our council their term finishes, so it staggers. We're having elections right now for new members of the Federal Council. They'll make the decision when we have a leadership race. I mean, it's the same thing, not quite the same, because they have a much bigger party and lots more money. But when Justin Trudeau announced on January 6th he'd step aside as soon as there was a new leader in place, at that point, the Liberal Party hadn't said what date that would be and what they would be doing. We found out sometime later it would be March 9th. These are not my decisions. They are the decisions of the party as a whole.
English is responding to that group trying to whip up a no vote in the leadership review.
As I said, there's not a group. Members in our party have every opportunity to participate. That's we're a party committed to grassroots democracy. That's why we have a mandatory leadership review within 6 months of every election. It's not controversial. I'm not concerned. I'm happy to have people engage, and they will vote, and we'll see. But we've never had a leadership review when a leader has already announced, I'm stepping down very soon, but it will be up to I've notified Federal Council in early July that I didn't intend to lead the party into the next election. We should plan and budget for a leadership race. So that's their decision.
My question about political violence, are you concerned given what we're seeing in the U.S. right now?
I'm very concerned to see anyone murdered, anywhere, regardless of their views. It's a tragedy. I hope very much, and I actually don't think it will spread to Canada. We've seen an increase in hostility, harassment, and nasty commentary on social media, but I think we need to denounce violence in any form, anywhere. And the fact that it spreads more in the U.S. has more to do with their weak gun laws than anything else. We have a very low rate of gun violence in Canada compared to that in the U.S. And it's a horror, and it's a horror. And we denounce whether killing of lawmakers in their own homes in the U.S. or people in the midst of a speech at a rally. It's obviously a tragedy that Charlie Kirk was murdered. Beyond that, I think Canadians need to hang on to our civility, respect for each other, and always making the space for free speech and denouncing violence of any kind.
You spoke about this government's commitments to Canada's climate targets. We really don't know if they're backing away. We haven't gotten a definite answer.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, I guess, what are you hoping to see in the strategy that they are developing?
So far, what we know is that Mark Carney and the Liberals absolutely ran on getting rid of the carbon tax, which was, I have to say, something of a surprise when they first announced it. And I hate to see public policy driven by algorithms and rage farming on social media, because the carbon price was the one thing that any government has ever done to get the needle moving in the right direction. It's not that we've never met our targets, it's that up until recently, we didn't have a government that got emissions moving in the right direction, that is, down. We would make a target, they'd keep going up. So I'm not wedded to a carbon price as a way to reduce emissions, but if you're not going to have the one thing that was working, what do you put in place instead? And if you put a pause on the EV mandate and you talk about fossil fuel infrastructure being potentially acceptable, then you've lost the plot. And it was Alex's story in the Toronto Star that quoted, that didn't seem to be able to get Mark Carney to commit to the Paris Agreement. I was disappointed, frankly, and surprised that the Paris Agreement wasn't mentioned in the speech from the throne. I figured that was a no-brainer. Now we have some question mark, but we don't have a definitive answer, as you say, David. So yes, we need a definitive answer. Our nationally determined contribution, as tabled with the UN, is a binding commitment on the part of Canada. We can still achieve it, but as Mark Carney pointed out in his book Values, the longer one delays in meeting climate targets, the harder it gets. The more you have to do to reduce emissions faster, and that becomes more difficult. I don't think Mr. Carney is afraid of doing difficult things, so I look forward from hearing from him how he thinks you can suck and blow at the same time.
Are you concerned that climate change is not a priority for him? And did you say you're surprised? You recite his book Values, which was pretty green.
Yeah.
Do you think he's kind of he's governing as a different person than he ran as?
Well, there's not much daylight between. I mean, there's a reason that the Conservatives backed everything that was brought forward in May and June, and none of the Greens or the NDP or Bloc voted for C5. We weren't, and I had thought mistakenly that when you are short 4 votes to be able to govern as a majority, and you're the Liberal Party, you'd look for those 4 votes on the left. They didn't need to look on the left because they've moved so far to the right that they got all the votes they needed from the Conservatives. I hope that stops, but we don't know yet. Much will be revealed, and as I said to a number of other journalists I was speaking to recently, I'm trying to give Mr. Carney the benefit of the doubt because this country needs good leadership. We're still getting threats from south of the border. We have, I think it's fair to say, an unreliable President of the United States who will not even honor his signature on an agreement he signs in the morning. By evening, who knows where he is. And I'm very concerned for democracy in the United States. I'm not sure it survives Donald Trump. But Canada's parliamentary democracy, our Westminster parliamentary system, is important as a bulwark of our democracy in this country. Mr. Carney doesn't seem to respect it so far. We'll see if that changes in the coming weeks.
You brought up the EV mandate. Where are you on removing the tariffs on Chinese-made EVs in order to potentially open up the canola market against it?
I think we should absolutely, we should look at our tariffs and trade policies with a climate lens. We haven't been doing that. The excessive tariffs we have on Chinese solar panels and we don't have a domestic market for solar panels, that make it that much more expensive for Canadians to install the cheapest electricity generator that you can, and you can have it on your own roof to charge your own car. So that doesn't make sense. In terms of the EV mandates, we need to bolster the EV manufacturing market in Canada. That's part of our auto sector that has a future. We need to support it. I think we should reduce we have 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs, bring that down and use it as absolutely as leverage to reduce the Chinese tariffs on canola.
Can I ask something about the name that they're using in that strategy, the carbon competitiveness strategy? What do you make of the word competitiveness? Do you see it as, rather than a race to the top for this ambition to maybe a race to just do good enough?
There are other Liberal words that make no sense. They've talked about exporting decarbonized Canadian oil. Those were words used in this place last spring. There is no such thing as decarbonized oil. We could absolutely have a climate competitiveness strategy. One would hope it would be which of the industrialized countries, which country in the G7 can show it has best strengthened its economy while reducing greenhouse gases. That's a great competition, and that's what we'd like to see. Until I know what they mean with the words they're using, it's really like an exercise in Lewis Carroll. You don't know what the words mean because there's rather a lot of words that make no sense.
Can I just clarify? A lot of environmentalists have already lost faith in the Carney government. You said earlier that you're giving him the benefit of the doubt. Do you mean to say that you still have faith that he will turn around on climate and deliver what you're expecting and hoping for?
Any Green who places their faith in the leader of the Liberal Party, regardless of his name, is an idiot. So I'm not going to put my faith in a leader of another party, period. Do I know Mark Carney? I thought I did. And therefore, I will not conclude prematurely that he's on the wrong side of his children's future. I will not conclude that. I'd like to see some evidence that he remembers what he wrote in the book Values. Otherwise, I'm prepared to pony up and buy another one, retail price, to give it to him so he might reread it.
What do you think's driving this then? If you think he personally believes in all the stuff that he wrote in Values, why would he be abandoning it?
Some strategy, obviously electorally, to cut Pierre Poilievre off at the knees by adopting all of his policies before Pierre Poilievre can be engaged in the next federal election, which we don't know when it will come. And it's certainly, Hélène was asking me about when we think the next election might be and how fast we can be ready. Nobody knows, but I think it's unlikely in less than a year, and I think Mr. Carney and the Liberal backrooms are trying to figure out how do we make Mr. Poilievre and his polling numbers drop farther and lower, take away all of his straw men by making the straw men Liberal straw men with the same arguments. And then where does Poilievre go to find angry people when you suddenly start having so many right-wing policies coming from the Liberals? I don't know what Mr. Carney's intentions are, obviously. I imagine he's keeping them a secret from Mr. Poilievre, and likewise, he's keeping them a secret from me. I don't mind if is anybody else waiting in the queue? I'm good. Okay, yes, please.
I just want to know, do you think, based on what you just said, do you think the Conservatives are the most likely party to prop up this Liberal minority government?
Well, so far, on a lock, this has been a Liberal-Conservative coalition that rammed through an omnibus bill that damaged Indigenous rights, damaged environmental law, and actually said we're using the Henry VIII clause that says if this law breaks other laws in future, that's okay, except we can't break the criminal code or the code of ethics. And then they added the Indian Act, which is bizarre, since the Indian Act is the most racist piece of legislation in Canada, but they did not add the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And to my amendments, you can't break the Fisheries Act, you can't break the Species at Risk Act. My amendments were rejected, which suggests they've thought about it, and the Conservatives and Liberals together have decided that if in pursuit of as yet named projects of national significance under C5, you can break environmental laws in this country, including those that protect species at imminent risk of extinction. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. À la prochaine.